You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I am joined once again by an original co-host, if he wants to be called that, of the Coaster101 podcast, our California correspondent, Eric Woolley. Eric, what's going on? Welcome back to the Coaster101 podcast.
Thank you, Andrew. Always happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's been a while. I think we're finally getting back into the regular cadence of some episodes here, which is good. I was telling John and Kyle last week, and then the week before that, where I was talking Dark Coaster, that I'm still moving, and there are cardboard boxes everywhere in this house, but it's a process, and I've been told that I can't do everything at one time. So I've painted a room. I've hung some roller coaster pictures on the wall where I'm recording the podcast. You can't see them because they're in front of me, not behind me. But yeah, we're good.
If it makes you feel better, I moved 2.5 years ago and still have some cardboard boxes in rooms and closets and stuff. So
Can't wait. Gonna be a blast. But while I was moving, you got to go on a little vacation, and you flew across the Pacific, and you went to Japan. Just you weren't there for work. You just, now that COVID is over, allegedly, I don't know. You went to Japan for vacation. So and while you were there, obviously you had a good time. You ate some probably delicious Japanese food, which over there is probably just food.
Lots of very delicious food.
And, probably saw some sights, saw some culture. But, as a theme park enthusiast and coaster enthusiast, you went to a couple of parks. This week on the show, we know you went to Tokyo Disney Sea and Tokyo Disneyland. We'll talk about those on a different future episode. But if you want some really good kind of overseas Disney talk, go back and listen to our episode with Nathan Firesheets, who did the all 12 Disney parks in 12 days challenge that he had a very special hashtag for that I cannot remember off the top of my head. But it's there. It's not too far deep in the archives, and Nathan was a really good guest. But Eric, we are going to talk this week about a park that was new to you, certainly new to me as someone who has never been to Japan, but Universal Studios Japan. And This is a park that opened when did it open? Do you know when it opened in relation to?
I think 2001 is when it opened. So I don't know what that is relative to any other Universal parks, but it's a little bit after Islands of Adventure was late 90s, right?
Yeah, it was right after Universal Islands of Adventure, but definitely it kind of has this. It definitely has a feel, looking at a map, to kind of like a Universal Studios Florida. Kind of a similar entrance on the left side of the park. Lands are kind of similar. The right side of the park is completely different. But let's dig right into it, Eric. I mean, what was it about Universal Studios Japan that was like, hey, when I go to Japan, I need to go here, compared to Nagashima Spa Land or anywhere else? What was it about Universal Japan?
Well, I probably the easiest answer to that is convenience. As I am always reminded when the few overseas theme parks I've been to is really nice. Getting to go to major cities that have a theme park that is connected by a short train ride to them. And so I was planning to go to Osaka anyway, which is where Universal Studios Japan is. I think Osaka's the third largest city in Japan. The park is, it's like not in the middle of the city, but it's pretty much in the city. Like, it is a very quick train ride. I stayed out by the park one night. So I basically went to the park the first day I got to Japan. And it was very convenient getting there, and like being able to walk to the park was nice. But like if you were staying in the middle of Osaka, it would be equally easy to go. So that was one of the big reasons. But also I wanted to go to, so despite living in California, I have not been to Universal Studios Hollywood since Super Nintendo World opened here. And so I knew I wanted to go to that in Japan, partly also because I know it'd been open a couple years. It's a little bit bigger, and the Japanese are even more into Nintendo than Americans are, I think. As somebody who's not super into Nintendo, I think the last Nintendo system I had was an N64, but still was still excited to go see Super Nintendo World. And then I know that it's got like I have know people who've been to it, and like their B&M Flying Coaster, Flying Dinosaur is supposed to be really good. And I know I was also expecting that in the same way the Tokyo Disney parks are sort of like just a little bit nicer than Disney parks in the US, even though Disney parks in the US are nice. I was like, Universal Japan will probably be like, that at least a little bit like more detail, higher quality than the US, which I think is probably true based on my experience.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, definitely.
Not that I don't love Universal parks in the US.
This is true. You just got back from Universal Orlando, so
Mm-hmm.
I mean you're kind of on
another
a
future podcast episode.
Exactly. We're just churning out content right here on the Coaster 101 podcast. And I know, California, obviously big state. You're in the northern part of the state. I don't want to dox you too much, but you're not in Southern California where Universal Studios Hollywood is. So you mentioned Nintendo, and this was the first ever Nintendo theme park land, the first of 3 to open, presumably 3. There could be more at this point, depending on what construction happens wherever.
I don't know what their plan. They must be planning to open them in at least Beijing, if not also Singapore, right?
Yeah, sure. Think. So let's get right into the Super Nintendo world. From all accounts, and I've seen people who have visited this in Japan, I've seen pictures and people who visit this in California. This is that kind of level of immersion that Universal first got with Harry Potter, but it is like jumping into a 16-bit Nintendo game and bringing it to real life. You walk through this warp pipe, and what do you see? What are your first impressions?
Yeah, I mean it's if you are like sensitive to like sensory overload, this would be a really bad place for you. Because basically, we should say, so the way you get in is you walk through this green warp pipe, and then you enter into, I think it's Princess Peach's castle. And so like even then, like you get out of the pipe and you're still like enclosed, and it's sort of a lobby in the castle. And then you step out of that, and you're basically like overwhelmed with sights and sounds. I think they like it. I'm sure anybody who's watched videos and read things about this from when it opened in Hollywood, I know there was a lot of stuff about that. Like just the amount of like action that is going on around you and like motion and things that are like not. There are you can see so. Japan has the one, it's got 2 rides instead of one like Hollywood. There's a Yoshi Omnimover ride, and you see that move that goes outside, so you see that moving around. And then there's a few other like things that are related to the attractions that are moving, but mostly it's basically just like props that are moving, but they are like every wall that's facing you in the land has something, whether it's a brick that's flashing or like the chompy flower monsters like going up and down and biting things and like coins spinning, all these things that you see in Super Mario games that are just like you're surrounded by them. And then it's the like Super Mario Brothers theme song playing like over you, which is I sort of as I was like staying there kind of in awe looking at all these things moving and the bright colors, like also realizing like, oh, this is like it's a very upbeat, high energy theme song. Not surprising from a classic video game, but like also adds a level of sort of like energy, like sort of pushes you to like feel good and like want to go run around and play and stuff like that. So it's just like, yeah, bright colors, lots of motion, lots of sounds, most of the like the music and the like dings of coins and stuff like that. It's sort of almost overwhelming to the senses, but all like in a very happy way.
Right. Okay. I can definitely, again, bright colors, not loud noises, but constant motion. It definitely seems like it could be maybe a little bit overwhelming. So,
yeah, and I will say that, like, I think because you mentioned the loud noises, like it did not actually feel like it didn't ever get grating. Like I feel like it was enough in the background that you kind of like noticed it, but then would stop noticing it after you were in the land for a little bit. So not like overwhelming. I feel like been in probably other theme parks, which is like overwhelming grating sounds, and they managed to sort of toe a line of not getting to that level.
Yeah, and let's talk the rides. As you mentioned, the Super Nintendo World in Japan has two rides compared to just the one currently in Hollywood. I think they're pretty landlocked there, but I think they're expanding. Right? I don't.
I
Maybe.
think there are long-term plans for that somewhere, but I
Okay.
don't know when that will actually happen because they're also
Gotcha.
making, in theory, Fast and the Furious roller coaster in Hollywood.
Allegedly,
Yeah.
rumors. We don't talk about rumors here. We talk about things that exist, like the Mario Kart. And what is this? Is the Mario Kart attraction, Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge, which is located inside of Bowser's Castle. And for those who played Mario Kart on the N64, presumably Eric's last system, and I know Bowser Castle is a favorite of my friends who still bring out the Nintendo 64 every once in a while. What was this attraction like? Again, I've tried to be spoiler free. I think I've reached a statute of limitations where it is an attraction that people have said it is slow moving, but there are augmented reality goggles, like an augmented reality visor that you put on that's got like the Mario hat on it. What'd you think of Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge?
Uh, yeah, I should clarify. In Japan, it's Mario Kart Koopa's Challenge because I think Bowser is called King Koopa or maybe just Koopa in Japan. It's very confusing as I realized,
Fair.
like when trying as trying to figure out, wait, what's this actually called? Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, I wrote it a few times. Luckily, this is I give tips about what I learned from how easy or hard it is to get into Nintendo World later. But I wrote it basically first thing in the morning, and I think like I definitely understand lots of the complaints people have. Like, it doesn't exactly feel like a race because it is slow moving. It's sort of like it's more like maybe Men in Black Alien Attack in the like pace that it's moving. And the car like spins a few times when like, oh, your car wipes out and does a spin. It's like kind of quick and disorienting. So like it's not like it is static. It's not like an Omni Mover like the Yoshi ride or something, but not it's not Radiator Springs. And I think, and I would also say that like the augmented reality system like works pretty well. So you put on this like hat, and it's got, instead of like 3D goggles that like cover your eyes the way, well, they're not allowed 3D rides left, but Battle for Ire had, it's sort of like it's like a shield that sort of looks like a hockey player's like the half
Like a
shields that
visor,
hockey
yeah.
players have, yeah, and sort of like that, and that like then projects the augmented reality on, so that you see like all the other the I guess Koopa other racers that you're racing against, and the shells and bananas and stuff like that. I think the thing that is like didn't work perfectly on that is that like the visor doesn't like totally cover your field of view. So like if you look like your peripheral vision, if you like look to the left or right or look down, like you don't see any of those things anymore. I think there was also like a little bit of like, I mean, this might be partly because there were lots of things in Japanese in terms of the instructions that like I didn't really understand like exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And like, okay, you shoot shells at things, but then like you also have to like pick up shells, and like wasn't clear. Do I have to do something to do that, or like no, you just like at some points your like vehicle goes over a box. I also realized partway through that like, oh, the way I aim is like you have to like look at the thing you want to shoot at, and that's basically aiming because it's using the AR as the like directing it, which was like, oh, I feel like I should be pushing the like triggers that I have, or like turning the wheel that I'm holding to aim, but no, it's actually like doing that. And there's a wheel that you also like can steer with, and so I think you get more points maybe by like there are certain times they'll tell you like, oh, turn left, turn right, and like you can force it to like sort of drift the way you do in Mario Kart. And so it's like it was a little like confusing and maybe not the great ride the first time I wrote. Although so then at the end of the day, land sort of emptied out and the lines got much shorter. And I wrote it a couple more times, and as I wrote it more and sort of figured out what was going on more, I started to enjoy it more, and like sort of like, yeah, I get that it's not a race, but like as I started to do it and understand it more, the interactive part got more fun, and I was sort of like, it still felt high enough energy that like I didn't notice that it's like going super slow. And so I think that there might be some aspect of it as it growing on me as you like figure out what's going on, and then also can like, oh, these are the different the different carts that I should shoot, and like ones that are worth different points, or like, oh, this is the bad guy, like this is the mini boss, and I need to be shooting at him or something like that. And so I felt like it grew on me as I did it more. And I'd be curious. I'm curious to when I finally get down to Universal Hollywood and see if it's any different or like if it still feels that same way. But I think I definitely understand the complaints, but I think the issues that people, when they rode the Hollywood one the first time, had bother me less as we went on. It's like, I don't know. I guess if I turn to like super fast rate, like I don't think of Mario Kart as being like super fast racing either. Like I remember most of what I remember of Mario Kart is shooting shells and dropping bananas. Like, so that's actually what I want to do more than the like. Yeah, it'd be nice if you could control like your speed and going around other cars, but like, the shooting the shells is more fun. That's what people actually want, I think, from Mario Kart Ride, and it did that pretty well as I got used to it.
So, do you think this is the if you were, let's armchair Imagineer a little bit here.
Yeah.
If you were kind of would you like if you were going to redo this part, this attraction, would you use that same ride system, or would you use something more like a Test Track or Radiator Springs Racers, or even one of those, dynamic attractions, drift coasters, or whatever?
I mean, I sort of feel like
still making those.
I guess it depends on what you're like. What's the most important thing for a Mario Kart? Is it the interactive aspect of like, look, the fun part of Mario Kart is shooting shells and like using all the abilities and becoming invincible and crashing into things? Then like, I think we have maybe talked about this before, that like interactive rides where it's moving fast are bad because you can't look at everything and you miss things, and then it's like, oh wait, what am I supposed to be shooting at? And like that's like any fast moving or fast-ish dark ride, I like can't have an interactive element because I like can't pay attention to them at all. Even slow moving ones, if there's too much going on, I don't like them. I actually thought that this did a pretty good balance of not having too much to shoot at, that you could sort of still look around, and having limited shell ammunition helped. Like times like, oh, I don't have any shells left, I have to watch. Right. So I think from like that, like I do sort of feel like this ride system, to have it be interactive, like this is kind of the ride system that you need to have, and like the vehicle moves enough that it like kind of works. Maybe like if I was really thinking like, oh, is there something that could be better, if it was like a trackless vehicle or something, and maybe could respond a little more dynamically to what you're doing with the steering wheel, would maybe help a little bit. But I don't think like a coaster or a test track kind of system would, like, you'd have to be, I feel like if you were doing that, if it was test track, you'd just be sitting there and like the ride would control when you shoot shells. And I think that would be less fun. That would be like, oh, it's like I'm a passenger on a Mario Kart. And I think that would be less fun.
Fair.
It might just be that it's hard to make a Mario Kart ride that it does all the things that you want from Mario Kart.
This is true. So we're based on what you're telling me, it sounds like, again, this is the best possible medium for this type of attraction. So
yeah,
we're going to go with that.
Only other thing, maybe if it was like actually a simulator kind of thing where you weren't moving at all, you could maybe do a little more with like the motion to make. Other than that, I think like Smuggler's Run isn't very fun, and that's sort of doing that.
And then you end up as engineer, and everything goes to hell. So it's just like, and this, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but I am very curious about this Yoshi Omni Mover attraction, because it is the only one right now. They are building it allegedly at Epic Universe. I don't think anything's been officially confirmed, but if you look through the lens of people like BioReconstruct or Alicia Stella over at Orlando Park Stop, I think it's pretty well documented that this Yoshi attraction is coming to Orlando. How was the Yoshi Dark Ride?
I mean, it's an Omni Mover Dark Ride. Like, there's not, I mean, like, there are some cute animatronics along the way, and like, I think I would say actually where it brings the most value is actually that it puts in the land like the sort of kinetic energy of having the vehicles moving around like on the top. Oh, there's another thing to look at, and like Japanese people at theme parks love waving at each other. So there's like, oh, there's people to wave at on the ride, or wave to if you're on the ride. And so like, but I don't like. There's nothing. There's
Okay.
nothing exciting about it. It's no haunted mansion. But like maybe if you were super into Yoshi, or if like I mean, it's clearly the kids ride in the land, and like certainly like I think it does a good job of that. It's got like cute animatronics and bright colors. That's what kids like, right? And
Yeah.
there is
So
actually a very small interactive aspect of it that is also clearly very much designed for kids. Because I think it's like, oh, when you see a certain color shell, like there's like a panel with 3 colored shells on it, and like you're supposed to hit the matching color. It's like, oh, this is for a 4-year-old.
fair. So on the scale of something like Haunted Mansion at the kind of the top end of Omnimover Haunted Mansion, or the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin, if you go down to like the seas with Nemo and friends post Hydrolators, but
I have not been on the seas with Nemo and friends, so I cannot
okay,
fairly comment. But I would think it's very much a kids ride Omnimover.
fair.
Put it
Okay,
that way.
we're gonna step out of Nintendo now, unless you want to talk about these. I know there's some interactive, kind of like mini games within the
Mm-hmm.
land. Did you participate in any of those, or
Yeah,
did you
actually,
get
I
did you get
did.
the
That was
power up band?
I did. So I did get a power up band, partly because I was sort of like, look, I feel like you should do all that. Partly because the Japanese yen is weak, so it is cheaper than buying one in America. But also, I learned, I'm almost positive that my research is correct, that like the ones from Universal Japan also work in Universal Hollywood, and presumably will work at Epic Universe as well. And so I was like, okay, if I can buy one here and then keep it forever. So I did, and actually, like the games are fun. So I think in Japan there are maybe 5 of them. I think Hollywood only has 3 or 4. I'm now trying to remember which ones I did. Again, it's one of those things where like some of them was like, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but like it's straightforward enough if you watch a couple people do it. And like usually it's something like the one I most remember is like I think it's a turtle going back and forth, and like it enters a pipe, and like you're supposed to punch a block. You're supposed to time it so you punch a block that like then it reacts when it's in the middle of the pipe, and the employee standing there sort of helps you if you like mess up a couple times, but also if you watch it a couple times, like, oh, this is the timing. And then it all links to an app, the Universal Studios Japan app, and there's a special like Super Nintendo part of that, and with you basically scan a QR code that's on your power band. When you do that, it links to it. And so as you play the 3 games, you get a bunch of points in the app. And then also if you've played 3 of the games, when you succeed at them, you get a key. And then when you have 3 keys, you can do the I think it's Bowser Jr. challenge, maybe, which is like actually one of the more interesting things. And I don't know, this is also spoilers for this, but like it's sort of it's also kind of an AR thing, not exactly, but it's like motion tracking. You like go in with a group of people, you stand in front of a screen, and you see basically a shadow of yourself on the screen, and then there's like stuff falling on the screen. You're supposed to like you jump around and like punch the things on the screen, and then they're like, oh, you have to like knock these out of the way. And that was very fun. I think what was funny is that was like that had a super short, like it was on the map with a wait time, but like you can't do it unless you've gotten 3 keys from the app from playing the other games. So it had this 5-minute wait time all day, and I'm sort of like feel like the park should recognize that like, okay, this attraction is empty half the time because people haven't gotten the keys, because the waits for all the games were super long all day, except at night. So that's why I went back into the land. So like to get into the land, like you can get an express pass, but those all sold out. That like gets you into land, and then when it's full, there's like a virtual queue thing that you can do. Pretty straightforward on the app. But like in the morning, if you go straight to it, the land's just open. And then same thing at night. I was there on a Thursday, and like after 7 p.m. maybe you could just, I think the park was open till 9, and you could like the land empty out enough that you could just go in. So when I went at night, and then the like waits for the games were much shorter, and so I was able to do them all then and go in that. And they were really fun. It's sort of like I would definitely recommend getting the power band. I don't remember how expensive they were, maybe $30 or something. Like I think it was fun to play all the games. I think it was fun. It was actually like the interface with the app was pretty fun. Like the app also tracks your stuff on the rides, and there's like things in the queues that like, oh, if you like punch them or scan your power band, like basically little hidden Easter eggs in the queues that you can like, oh, will light up, and then you like get a sticker in your app or something. So like it was kind of added a level of like exploration that was pretty fun, and didn't seem to completely drain my battery the way the Disney Play app that maybe doesn't, does that still exist even? Always sort of
Who knows? Who knows?
killed my phone. It was like another one of those things where I'm like, this is like Disney tried to do this and Universal's just done it so much better, I think, by scanning the QR code so it can actually track you, and then like having it just be like more straightforward what you're doing. But they were all fun. I think like if you would go, and this might be the same case in Hollywood, is like middle of the morning, middle of the day, the lines for it will be super long and then probably not worth it. But if it empties out a little bit in the evening, then like, then you can run through, play all the games pretty quickly, and then get to the extra attraction.
Got it. Okay, cool. So now we're going to leave Super Nintendo World, because I think we've been talking for about 20 minutes or so just about Nintendo. But there's so much more that Universal Studios Japan has to offer. The park, we are a roller coaster podcast. According to RCDB, there are 4 roller coasters here. There is a ride that I'm inevitably going to mispronounce. It's called Doraemon XR Ride Nobita's Sky Utopia. That was close. Probably not right.
Probably the easier for that is that, so that ride is normally Space Fantasy the ride. It's a max spinning coaster, but surprisingly, Universal Japan still does regular VR overlays on it. Like, it's still VR connected. And so what they seem to, it seems like maybe every year for like 6 months out of every year, they basically rotate through different VRs. This was themed to Doraemon, which is, I think, like a children's anime, but it's been around for like, basically like a kid's cartoon, I think, that's been around forever. I think it's been around since like the 70s, 80s. I didn't recognize what it was, but if you look it up, I think he's a cat or something. You might recognize the little character. It's like a blue and white cat that looks like a 80s Japanese cartoon character.
Do you have to ride it with the VR, or can you ride it without?
As far as I could tell, you have to ride it for the VR. I didn't ask. So this was one. So I got a Universal Express Pass. The way Japan does it is kind of weird. You basically like, they've got versions that have 4 rides. It's basically like you choose a version that has a set group of rides to go on. There's like a 7 ride and a 4 ride version. They also like different ones will sell out. So like any of them that included the Mario Kart ride, like, all sold out before I was on top of stuff enough to get one. But then it was like, okay, well, I can pick which rides, like which mix of rides seems to make the most sense. And this I knew would have the longest line, or one of the longest lines. So I got one that had this on it. So I did with the Express Pass. As far as I could tell, maybe there was a way to ask. I didn't ask if you can. It's too introverted to ask.
That's fair.
To ask the Japanese employees if I could do it without the VR. But it was also good. I want to say that, like, I don't know what VR system they use on it, but it was certainly way better than any of the like Six Flags VR coasters in the past, and like it seemed to actually work pretty well from the VR point of view. Like, it didn't make me sick. It didn't seem to slow them way down. I don't know if the VR headset had audio or if the cars already had onboard audio, and so you could sort of tell what was going on. It was all in Japanese, but it was still like, so I actually thought it was pretty good. The only downside of mine is the ride went down when we were like right before the last, I think we were like, it's sort of like the last like section. It's got a few like, I think it's got a few booster wheel section lifts, and so like we were on the last one when the ride went down, so then we like had the last 10 seconds of the VR like paused and then sort of needed to resync a little bit, and then we had the like last 10 seconds of the ride, and it was like, it was kind of anticlimactic. But
got it.
I don't know if that's the VR's fault or just like, okay,
well, it's good to see. Well, I'm gonna lie, that's a lie. I don't like VR on coasters. No. But it's an indoor enclosed mock spinning coaster, so that's always, those are presumably fun. I mean, I would have been
it felt like a fun ride. I would have been I kind of wish that it had still been like Space Fantasy the ride, which it was. I think it was until like early 2023, and then they put the newest VR on it. It's like, so it might be one of those things. I don't know how far out they like schedule that, and like if you can look at, I think there is on their website, it says like, oh, the Doraemon is like a limited time attraction, and it might say like when that ends. And so if you were like, oh, if you were planning way ahead, you could probably be like, oh, these are the dates that it might be
It's like, I
normal.
don't want VR. Just take it off. Let me know when I can come.
Yeah.
Let me know when I can visit. But the two other kind of major roller coasters there is the B&M, which is Hollywood Dream the Ride, which I remember when Hollywood Rip Ride and Rocket was kind of being constructed. Everyone had this idea that it was going to be Hollywood Dream the Ride with the onboard audio, and it kind of was. I mean, definitely Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Florida does have onboard audio.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, completely different manufacturers, different ride experiences. But what was Hollywood Dream the Ride like?
It is. So, like, I will say that for all of these, like, I did I don't know if it was intentional, but did a good job of not knowing anything about any of these rides before I went in. So I didn't know anything about it. The onboard audio on it was like pretty good. It was fun that they have that. It's got a nice lighting package at night too. It was a mix of like Western songs, as the options were a mix of Western songs that I recognized, and then like things like anime theme songs from Japanese TV shows and other things written in Japanese that I did not understand. I should have, if I'd been more on top of it, I would have looked up if there were secret tracks, but probably not necessary this time. It was fun, but it is like, it was interesting because it's like, it's a normal sit down B&M, but like does not have, there are no inversions. It's basically, I would describe it as like the gentlest or tamest B&M that I think I've ever been on. And it's basically like, it's an out and back layout with like a bunch of hills. I think there's maybe like one kind of overbank turn and like a helix. But it's like, it's not a very intense roller coaster. Fun, but like not intense. They're also, so currently they run it. So there's Hollywood Dream the Ride normal. And then so it's I think they have 3 trains, and they run one of the trains backwards. They call it Hollywood Dream the Ride Backdrop. And I actually think that was like, it was more exciting in the backwards version. That was another one. Both of them, I think, because they have, certainly the one train Backdrop has like a crazy long, that might have been the longest line throughout the day. And so that was the express pass that I got also included that, because I was like, I think this will be a very long line. Very thankful about that. And yeah, so it was a little more exciting going backwards, but it was like, definitely this is not like the B&Ms that we are used to going to Cedar Fair or Six Flags parks.
So I've got to ask, we're gonna set the internet on fire, and I know you're not necessarily the best person to ask this question, because you like scoff at people for counting coaster credits sometimes, and by people I mean me.
I don't necessarily scoff at people for counting them. I scoff at people for riding crappy coasters just to get a credit, or tiny children's coasters that are 4 hours from their home.
Anyway, we don't need to. That's another podcast episode coming soon. The most embarrassing roller coasters we've ever ridden. So, but is Hollywood Dream the Ride Backdrop? Should it be counted as a secondary credit?
I'm not the right person to ask, I don't think, but I don't know. What do you think? Is that like, is it different enough that you
see? To me, I think the track institutes the credit. Yeah. So if you take the track forwards or backwards, I'll use something like the Racer at Kings Island or Thunder Road at Carowinds. To me, 2 credits: left track, right track. You experience different forces, different rides. But I've been on the Batman, I believe it was at Six Flags Over Texas, when it was running backwards. I only count that as 1, even if I go back and ride it. Presumably, hopefully it's forwards again, because riding that backwards was not fun. So I don't know. I guess so, but it is like a different experience, right? I guess if a coaster got new trains, you probably wouldn't count it as a new ride. Yeah, exactly. New train. We got to ask that guy on Twitter who's like the beast, because it added 3 feet of track and he rode it at night as opposed to riding it during the day. He's like, I got 4 new credits. He's that guy. Yeah, we'll ask him. He'll probably give us some answer that we're going to disagree with. But the last big roller coaster I want to talk to, and I want to ask you about this specifically because I know Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain is probably one of your favorite roller coasters. And Universal Studios Japan obviously has their own B&M flying coaster, the very creatively named the Flying Dinosaur. How was the Flying Dinosaur?
It was really good. I mean, it's one of those things. Again, I'm hard to like. I had a hard time thinking like, is it way different from other B&M flying coasters? I don't think so. Like it felt like a B&M flying coaster, but it was really good. If you like B&M flying coasters, it is definitely, well, I would say, definitely better than the like sort of smallish Superman ones at some of the Six Flags parks. I think not as good as Tatsu. That's part of that might be my bias. Although I also think Tatsu, like part of why I like it so much is the way it kind of uses, like it's on this hill in the middle of Magic Mountain. There's a bunch of trees around it, very forested. But like, Flying Dinosaur was definitely like a very good ride and a very good B&M flying coaster. It's also like one of the way it's sort of on, like kind of runs along the I guess it's actually a little bit the way Velocicoaster does. Like it's on the lagoon equivalent at Universal Studios Japan. So like for looking at it, it's amazing for that. Like there's a bunch of spots where you like get different angles and views and like can take lots of good photos and video. Also another, as I mentioned, the Japanese love waving in theme parks, and like the lift hill goes up basically over the pathway and like over like a bridge and stuff. And so like, as you know, with the flying coasters, you're lying down facing down. And so Japanese people both on the ride will wave down at guests who are walking underneath, and guests underneath will like stop and look up and wave and watch as the ride climbs the lift hill, which is very fun.
Did you wave either walking under it or riding the coaster?
Of course. I had to like, you know, who wouldn't? If somebody waves at you from a roller coaster, why wouldn't you want to wave back? I actually love waving at people from roller coasters. I'll do that like anytime I'm on a roller coaster where like if we're going past people who are watching, like I love waving at them.
All right. And then you're like, I'm on a podcast, and they're like, we don't care.
Yeah. I point at my Coaster101 shirt and try and get them to read and subscribe.
That's what I do. And everyone's like, nah, stay away from him. He's a weird guy.
Yeah.
Cool. Again, on the subject of counting kitty credits, did you ride the flying hippogriff?
I did not ride Flay of the Hippogriff. I was sort of I on my recent Universal Orlando trip also did not ride Flay of the Hippogriff. Although I might have that credit. I was sort of trying to focus on things that were unique to Japan, or that like maybe had been somewhere in the US but weren't there anymore with this trip.
Yes. Okay. I want to talk a couple then about these attractions that are, you know, kind of also available in some form or fashion in the US, or were formerly available. And with that, we have to go to one of my favorite attractions of all time, Jaws the Ride. And yeah, you've experienced Jaws on the Universal Studio Tour. You never got to experience it down in Orlando. So you probably don't have this like level of nostalgia and just like love for this attraction that I do.
I have zero level of nostalgia for the attraction.
Well, I want to ask, how was the Jaws experience? Presumably, you know, it follows a similar storyline. If I had to guess, I've never watched like a, you know, Jaws in Japan YouTube video, but
yeah, this is hard. So like, it's entirely in Japanese, not surprisingly. So like I don't really know what the storyline was. So I feel like I can't tell you exactly what the storyline was. We were on a boat. There was a driver. We went around for a while. It seemed like a bunch of times the small Japanese woman driving our boat picked up a shotgun and shot things, and there were sometimes explosions. And that's most of what I like was able to piece together what was going on. Unclear if we were like hunting Jaws, or if like Jaws was attacking us and she was scaring Jaws away, or trying to kill Jaws and kept missing and hitting like oil tanks instead, which is like I feel like a pretty common Universal theme park trope.
Exactly.
Does that roughly line up with what Jaws in Orlando was?
Yeah, let me see if I can give you the Jaws the Ride rundown in like 30 seconds. So back in you hop aboard Captain Jake's Amity Boat Tour is the best, and that's
Mhm.
because they're the only scenic tour on the island. They want to take you back and see sights from the movie Jaws. Nobody had seen a great white in those parts in 30 plus years. And you're riding around.
So this is supposed to take place post, like 30 years after the movie
Yes.
Jaws. Got
Yes. And it's kind of like taking you back to see the sights of Amity Island.
Yeah.
And you round this corner, and there's this boat it's been attacked, and it's like, oh, there's only one thing that could have done this. It's a shark. The shark goes under the boat. The boat captain pulls out a grenade launcher, says something like, oh, you mean this thing's loaded? Then you go into the boathouse. The shark goes under you again.
Remember that.
Then they come out of the boathouse. They try to shoot the shark. They hit the gas dock. There's big explosions, fire, boom. And it's like, okay, we're going to get off here. And then the shark comes right up to the side of the boat.
Yes.
And okay, same attraction. I think I was a little over 30 seconds there, but
I think it follows basically the same storyline. And that at the end, does the captain kill the shark? Is that how it ends? Okay.
Shoot it. It comes right up to the boat. He shoots it with the fake grenade launcher. Then you get this nasty, haggard-looking, like just gross shark.
Yeah,
and it's like, ew, that thing's disgusting.
I think she had a shotgun, not a grenade launcher, but maybe it was a grenade launcher.
It's it is what it is.
Yeah.
So
lots of shooting, some fire, and shark robot comes out of the water.
Perfect.
Yeah, basically.
Seems perfect. So now I need to go to Japan and ride this, because that, like, you can take the coasters, you can take Hollywood Dream the ride, you can take whatever. You can take Nintendo World. If I get to ride Jaws again as like an adult, and I haven't ridden it again since like the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, when I rode it, I feel like on one trip I rode it like 7 or 8 times because I loved it that much. I just need to go to Japan and ride this. Like, I could ride Jaws in Japan and be happy, I feel like.
You should do it. Easy.
Okay.
Also, especially, I mean, at some point I am contemplating writing a post after I do some more research, figuring out that at least from California, I'm pretty sure going to Universal in Japan and Tokyo Disney is cheaper than going to Orlando for me, from ticket prices and food prices and hotel prices all being significantly lower, to the point that it cancels out the difference in airline price. And so if you've got like airline miles, you live pretty close to a major international airport, like if you've got airline miles, yeah, not that hard for you. You could afford to go to Japan.
I got a honeymoon I got to plan at some point, but eventually I'll get over there.
I know a good place for a honeymoon.
I do too.
Lots of good food.
That's another episode of the. No, I'm kidding. And then on the subject, Eric, because I know you're going to want to talk about this, because it wouldn't be an episode of the Coaster101 podcast if you didn't bring it up. They've got an edition or a version of your favorite live theme park stunt-tacular show, Waterworld. How does it compare to your beloved in Hollywood?
Basically identical, as far as I could tell. I think it's also one of the things that with all the, I mean, you see this a lot at Tokyo Disney. I think it was maybe a little bit less so in Universal, but like lots of face characters who are, I assume, American. And so that was still the case in Waterworld. There were like a couple of the like stunt actors were Japanese, but also like a bunch of white people. And so I think that is like sort of, it was still all in Japanese. And I think probably a bunch of that is just like, it's all a recorded track. They're not actually like doing a lot of the shouting. And so it's like sort of funny seeing the like mix of different looking characters, but also being like, they brought in white guys from Hollywood to do these stunt shows. But it's still like, it's basically the same and still great. It definitely continues to, it keeps Universal Japan as one of the top tier Universal parks, meaning the 4 of them that have Waterworld compared to the one that does not.
I was going to say the 2 that don't.
Yeah.
So
Islands of Adventure doesn't need its own. But man, I can't believe Orlando does not have one.
Here's what we need. Okay, Poseidon's Fury is now closed. Let's put Waterworld there. It's not going to make a lick of sense, but let's just do it.
I'm not sure there's enough space there for it.
Yeah, we'll make they got it's just backlot. It's like
They can figure it out. Yeah,
they can make it happen. Or they've got the Wild Wild West stunt show, Fear Factor Live stage. They could do it there too.
Yeah,
so
there's space.
There is
space. And clearly, Universal still knows how to build these since Beijing just built one 2 years ago or whatever.
True. And then kind of the last attraction I want to talk about, because then we're going to talk about some kind of future development of sorts at the parks, because recently they announced that their version of Spider-Man, along with their Terminator 2 3D and Backdraft, the latter two, which have not opened since they closed for COVID. They've announced that Spider-Man's going to close in 2024. So technically, you're one of the last people to ride the Spider-Man attraction in Japan, which, looking at the map and looking at pictures, it looks like it's in the Revenge of the Mummy building from Universal Studios Florida. Is it?
Oh. I've only been to Universal Studios Florida twice. I don't remember exactly what the building looked like, but it is like
the same.
Yeah, it is. It is in a big building in the New York section. I assume similar. So I must have been one of the I forget exactly when they announced it was closing, but I was there right before they announced it was closing. It is, it's an identical ride to the version in the US other than being in Japanese.
Right.
I think I'm curious as to what they're going to do there, because I think Spider-Man is very popular in Japan. I think much more so than other Marvel superheroes. And so I'm curious if they're what they're gonna do with that space. I was disappointed as well when I was there. Backdraft and Terminator, like you said, they've been closed and stayed closed, and then Park finally announced that they're not ever reopening. I was sort of disappointed those were closed, because I have never Terminator was already closed when the first time I went to Universal Orlando. And I have very vague memories of Backdraft as a kid, and so I don't remember loving it. I remember there being lots of fire and it being very hot in the room, but it was sort of that'd be fun nostalgia for that. And so I was sort of a little disappointed they were both open. I remember Terminator had a sign that was temporarily closed, and then they finally were no. But
we're good. So yeah, Terminator was fun. I mean, I remember it from Universal Studios Florida. I think I will say, even not knowing anything about a Bourne movie, I think that Bourne is certainly an improvement with the technology. But Terminator was really good for kind of that nostalgia, kitschy vibe that you come to expect from, a theme park show that made its debut in the early 90s. But what do we think here? They're kind of right on top of each other. Backdraft, or Spider-Man and Terminator, I think, were right next to each other, and then Backdraft was kind of across the street a little bit.
Similar area, I know, because they're in the Backdraft, I think, was in the San Francisco area, which is next to New York area, and they're sort of all along the edge of the area. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of space and a lot of stages then that they have. I'm not sure if there's it's one. I think something that really stood out to me at Universal Japan is how much it seems like in Japan, Universal has gotten all of the IP. They're all the Universal movie stuff that we know about, and then we know they got the Harry Potter and the Nintendo stuff. But then there's also there's a Sesame Street Land here. There is they have Peanuts characters. They have Hello Kitty, which is shows up a little bit in the U.S. parks, but is a bigger presence. They have in their parade, they had a bunch of Pokemon stuff. They also have what I didn't really I didn't know what any of them were, but there were a bunch of attractions, either temporary attractions or overlays, similar to the Doraemon one from a bunch of Japanese animes that I don't know what they are, but then looking them up or texting my friends who are more into anime and being do you know what this is? We were oh yeah, that's that, and we're oh, they've got all of these popular Japanese IPs that sort of didn't seem to have permanent spots. But would be used as overlays, or the 4D theater would do something with them. And so I don't it sort of feels well, there's a lot of options that Universal in Japan has to put in there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's something that is more of a unique Japanese thing goes into one of those sound stages. Or they pick up Bourne and move that to Japan because that's cheaper to just redo the same thing somewhere than design something new.
It's true.
But it was sort of like, it seems like now having a bunch of sound stages and like a bunch of IP, both like the main Universal stuff, but also Japanese specific stuff. Like they have a lot of options for things to put into those spaces.
If anyone at Universal Creative happens to listen to this podcast, which I don't think they do, but I'm going to just put this out into the universe, and I'm going to go with a attraction based on my favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time. We need Pokemon Snap the Ride, where you take pictures. It's interactive. You can have the AR element, kind of like the Mario Kart. Anybody at Universal Creative wants to talk. I've got the idea kind of in a blue sky phase in my head. So I'll put that out in the universe as something that could happen.
Well, I also sort of wonder, like, they've got Super Nintendo World, but like that's clearly actually Mario Land, right? In
Right.
both parks, the US, and like there are rumors for Universal Islands of Adventure is like, oh, Zelda stuff where Poseidon's Fury is. And that's like, okay, well, Nintendo Land's going to be over an Epic Universe. So that's like, clearly they are okay using Nintendo IP outside of Mario Land if they want to. So like maybe it will be a Pokemon ride. Pokemon is incredibly popular.
This is true. A couple more questions. I want to ask you, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. Your knowledge of the Japanese language is not, we're not going to call it strong. You probably know a couple of phrases, a couple of
I picked up a few words while I was there, but it's like under probably single digit words and phrases still.
Yeah. So how was Universal Studios Japan for a predominantly English speaker? Presumably, like in the U.S. parks, they have the maps in 4 languages, so you can get a map in English. But how was it as an English speaker being there? Did you find it difficult at all?
No, I mean I think there's like it's obvious they actually I think the Universal Japan the English app worked pretty well for the most part. I think certainly as well or better than any other theme park apps, and on the high end of theme park app quality. It's not perfect, but like worked pretty well. I think they did have. I'm trying to remember if they had paper maps. They may have and had those in English. I think there were a couple things. There were a couple like special things that like I couldn't figure out. They were like again related to like a seasonal like thing related to a Japanese anime that was like find these and collect them and do something. And I was like I don't know what this is or how to do it. I think they were like maybe and the biggest like you can't figure out what's going on. It's like all the rides are in Japanese and like there aren't subtitles on like the ride. So if it's when parks like Universal or Disney where like it's not just a roller coaster, there's like something going on here and like you're gonna miss all of that, like the Jaws ride where it's like I don't really know what's happening. But if you've like that doesn't like take away from it being entertaining. I mean the Waterworld was all in Japanese, but like I've seen that enough. I know the plot of it. Like I go to watch the big explosions, right? So it's
you could watch it. You could watch it and recite it from memory at this point.
Almost. I don't go to the park often enough to do that, but and then like all the signage is in English, so that's like it is not like you're never gonna go to a restaurant and not know what the like food options are or something like that. And like the cast members, like there are some cast members that they don't. What do they call them at Universal? They're not cast members. Team members. They like most of them will speak like a little bit of English or enough to like point you in the right direction if you're looking for something or like show them something on a map. The way I mean, in general, people in Japanese are usually friendly and helpful and will like do their best to help you find something. Like that was the case too. I don't think I never ran into anything where like I couldn't find something or somebody was confused what I was asking about.
Gotcha.
They're used to enough foreign visitors that like it's fine.
Makes sense. And then the last question I've got, I think Japanese parks, as a kind of just a general rule, they have better food options and quality and unique items than their U.S. counterparts. Mainly because as Americans, we love chicken fingers, hot dogs, pizza, and French fries, and that's what we love. How was the food at Universal Japan? Did you have anything crazy that you were like, wow, I can't believe I'm eating this in a theme park?
I don't know if there was anything that like seemed like way too nice to be in theme park. I sort of did. I didn't do a lot of like full meals and kind of tried to snack on things throughout the day. I did so a couple of the things that are not so. The other thing that Super Nintendo World in Japan has that the US doesn't is another food stand, more like so. There's the restaurant, then there's also a quick service stand um, under the Yoshi ride, and so one of the things that I got there that I read was like, I think they call it a yakisoba calzone, and so yakisoba is like basically like stir fried Japanese noodles, like sort of noodles with soy sauce cooked on a grill with like vegetables. And so it was like a calzone. It looked like a turtle shell, like a green shell sort of dough, and then like inside were noodles and cheese. It's like calzone, and so like very weird, and definitely like did not look appetizing, but like it tasted really good, and it was like a very solid snack. I think then the one of the other things that I got that stood out was a Hello Kitty barbecue pork bun, so like a Chinese bao basically, but was looked. I think I posted this on Twitter when I was there. That was like looked like Hello Kitty. It was very cute and adorable, and also it was very delicious.
And then you bit into Hello Kitty's face.
Yeah, and the insides were very delicious. I think that's like so. There were I know a couple things that I did not get that I'd been told were very good. Or well, one very bad, one very good. A friend of mine who'd been there just a few months before I went. The next to the Jaws ride, there's a stand that sells shark nuggets. They're made with shark meat. My friend said they were disgusting. So I chose not to get those. But if you want to go full novelty, like you probably will not find those anywhere else. I don't even think shark meat is that common in general, even in Japan. But he then said the cake at the same stand that sells the shark nuggets was delicious. But I didn't. By the time I got over there, when I was planning to get dessert, I learned that they closed earlier than I had expected, and so I was not able to try the Jaws cake. But as always, I learned when I've been to parks, and it's actually, guys, U.S. parks are sort of the same way. That like, if there's like a specific food I want to try, I really should check when these stands open and close. And I will say the Universal app was not great at like telling you the hours for different restaurants. It was like
Perfect. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get your Jaws cake. But before we wrap this up, do you have if somebody listening to this podcast was like, I want to go to Japan and I want to experience Universal Japan, do you have a piece of advice or a tip for them as it relates to trip planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, so like, it's one of those Japanese parks, at least now, are sort of always crowded. I went on a Thursday. It was a Thursday sort of, it was not a public holiday, but it was close to one of the big Japanese public holidays, so maybe it was a little bit busier than normal. I think the main tip is one that like, the park opens before the time they say on the website. So like the website will say they open at 9, but they like will open the gates and not just like open the gates to let people in. Like they will start running rides at 8:30 or something. And it's just sort of random. And so like, even though it's really annoying, I read this tip a bunch of places and it turned out to be true that like, you know what, especially if you're on vacation, maybe you're staying next to the property or something, like get there an hour before the park is supposed to open. There will be a bunch of people already in line. I mean, you could get there even earlier if you want to, but like get there earlier. The park will open half an hour or something before it's scheduled to. And then like, again, for something like going to Nintendo Land, then you don't have to worry about the like, oh, I need a virtual queue stuff. No, it's like if you get there early, you go in. And then the other like main takeaway I had was like, oh, at least on a weeknight I think the park was, maybe it was 9 to 9 were the hours or something. And like, at least on a weeknight, it was like, okay, after like at dinner time or after dinner time, like the park emptied out. And so that was like much easier to like go ride the Mario Kart ride twice and like do the games in Super Nintendo Land at night. And like also like different view. Like it was fun to get night rides on coasters and like see all the lit up stuff. And so I think like the both like timing is like, look, if you're gonna go and you only have one day, like do a full day. The express pass helped, but like I don't know if you totally need that, as long as you're like you can get there early and you can stay till the end. That's like you can do things. I think the only other thing, I was not efficient as walking around, so like you definitely could maximize, but in the same way that like Tokyo Disney is sort of just really nice to be around. Like the park looks really nice, and it is like it felt much bigger than both certainly Universal Hollywood, but even Universal Florida, like the actual Universal Park. Like it felt much bigger than that, and so like walking around sort of took a while, but it's also like it was nice and like there were lots of good things to look at as you walk around, like lots of detail and everything.
I love it. Well, Eric, you've successfully made me jealous of your trip, which
come with me next time. I'm like, it's so easy to get to from San Francisco.
Yeah, but then I have to get to from Charlotte to San Francisco. So
yeah, it's easy.
Sure. It's only money. Whatever. Anyway.
Airline points. Airline miles. That's what you've got. We'll figure out what Chase points you have.
Okay. We're on it. This has been an episode of the Points Guy podcast. Just kidding.
Yeah. I was really got to figure out how to get credit cards to like give us money for referring people if we pitch them that much.
My gosh. That's another episode for another day. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. Make sure you head to our website, coaster101.com, to read the latest and greatest in all theme park and roller coasters. We're also on social media at Coaster101. So it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. If you go back far enough in the Twitter archives, you can see Eric's live tweets from his Japan trip, but also trips that the rest of the Coaster 101 team has taken while I've been moving. If you're listening to this podcast and enjoy the sound of our voices, make sure you're leaving 5-star reviews on Spotify and written reviews and 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate those. And as we kind of bring this show back from a brief hiatus, we need the audience to find us, and the best way to do that is through those reviews. A huge thank you, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.
Bye.